Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is pretty focused. We're examining that raw tension you get when high-stakes business strategy, which often needs speed, and let's face it, secrecy just crashes headlong into the absolute requirement for public transparency, democratic oversight.
Exactly. We're diving deep into a specific governance controversy.
Hmm.
It involves Washington State's Jefferson Healthcare, or GHC, a public hospital district. And they're really explosive attempt to form a regional partnership, the Peninsula Health Alliance, they called it.
And this is such a critical case study for listeners maybe not steeped in state and local regs. These public hospital districts, PHDs, they're different.
They really are. They aren't private companies. They're unique government bodies, taxpayer-funded, run by commissioners, elected by the community, and they are strictly bound by state laws like the Open Public Meetings Act, the OPMA. So this case, this Peninsula Health Alliance fiasco, it gives us this incredible, almost minute-by-minute look at what happens when elected officials and administrators maybe start treating a public institution a bit too much like a private business, pushing those transparency rules right to the edge, maybe past it, all in the name of, well, strategy.
And the source material we have is dense. It chronicles secret meetings, actions taken apparently without proper board approval, a dissenting commissioner allegedly being silenced.
Ugled, essentially.
Yeah, and then the fallout. Criminal complaints, civil lawsuits. It's really a blueprint of political and legal maneuvering right there at the local level.
And the core conflict, the thing you really need to keep in mind as we unpack this, is this dilemma facing hospital leaders everywhere, frankly. On one hand, they argue, look, we need to pursue confidential strategic planning.
Because the financial pressures are real.
Immense. Federal funding cuts, shaky reimbursements, and this huge burden of charity care costs. They need to be nimble.
Yeah.
But the other side, the public, the dissenters, they argue just as firmly that for any elected body spending taxpayer money, democratic oversight, and transparency, well, they have to come first, always. No exceptions for organizational convenience.
Okay, let's get into the proposal itself then. Section 1. The Peninsula Health Alliance, or PHA. Why an alliance in the first place? This wasn't just an idea floated casually, right? It was a response to some serious financial headwinds.
Oh, absolutely. That financial context is, the engine driving this whole thing. Olympic Medical Center, OMC, the hospital JHC wanted to partner with, was openly looking for help. They were reportedly under, quote, significant financial stress.
Okay.
Now, JHC, Jefferson Healthcare, they're doing relatively better. Actually, one of the few districts that didn't lose money during the pandemic, which is saying something.
Yep.
It is. But they knew they weren't bulletproof. They acknowledged that closer regional ties were probably essential for their own long-term stability. And a huge factor they pointed to, that skyrocketing cost of charity care. JHC estimated it was heading towards $12.5 million a year.
$12.5 million. That's a staggering number for a district that size. It perfectly frames the administration's argument. We need to collaborate to survive.
Exactly. So JHC leadership saw this alliance, the PHA, as this vital, proactive, strategic move. They weren't just waiting for a crisis.
So what were the concrete goals? What did they hope to achieve operationally?
Pretty standard, but crucial stuff for hospitals. Economies of scale, basically, and more leverage. They wanted to significantly boost their collective bargaining power with insurance companies, get better rates,
Makes sense.
enhance their purchasing power for supplies, equipment, bulk buying,
Yeah.
improve their contracting ability overall, and a big one, share expensive services. Think specialized medical equipment, maybe back office administrative functions. Avoid duplicating those costs across the region.
Right. Cut the redundancy.
Yeah. In today's healthcare market, that kind of integration can honestly be the difference between staying open and closing down.
And the vehicle for this was known internally, kind of cloak and dagger style, as Project Driftwood.
That was the code name, yes.
And this wasn't like a back-of-the-napkin plan. It was formalized.
Oh, incredibly detailed. The PHA proposal submitted to OMC on February 12, 2025. It was a hefty document, 160 pages total, with over 50 pages, just for the core governance plan and appendices.
And the governance, that's where the friction really ignited.
That was the flashpoint. The proposal laid out this new structure, a brand new not-for-profit entity, the Peninsula Health Alliance, or PHA, and overseeing it, a new 12-member super board. This board was meant to set the unified strategic direction for both hospitals, JHC, and OMC.
Okay, let's zero in on that super board structure, because this is where transparency concerns morph into fears about losing local control. The specific setup was 7 members from OMC, which is in Clallam County, and 5 from JHC Jefferson County. Why did that 7-5 split immediately cause such a backlash?
It's pure governance math, really. A 7-5 split just means Clallam County gets an automatic voting majority on this new, powerful superboard.
Right.
So for Jefferson County residents and taxpayers, the immediate fear was stark.
Yeah.
Our local control, the specific board we elected to represent us, would be structurally weakened. Outvoted on the big decisions, strategic plans, major investments, maybe even service cuts down the line. The worry was their elected board becomes, well, kind of irrelevant.
And the proposed leadership structure just added fuel to that fire, didn't it? Concerns about who's really running the show.
Absolutely. The proposal put forward GHC's own CEO, Mike Glenn, as the alliance's first executive director. It was planned as a 3-year phased approach. Now, proponents might say, well, that just reflects GHC's stronger performance.
Yeah.
But critics immediately jumped on it. Concerns about potential personal gain, promotion, not just a title change, but a bigger role, more influence, presumably a bigger paycheck, all tied to a plan he spearheaded, seemingly without full public board approval first.
Okay, but let's be fair. The board majority and the CEO, they didn't just ignore the criticism about the 7-5 split. Later, around June 2025, they pushed back. They argued that ratio didn't automatically mean OMC was in total control. What was their counter-argument?
Their defense centered on procedural safeguards, supposedly baked into the proposal. The board chair, Jill Bueller, and CEO Glenn claimed the plan included things like proration of votes or strict supermajority requirements for critical decisions. Meaning, they argued that for the really important stuff, quote, each board had to approve it before it would become a rule. Their line was that JHC would therefore retain independent authority over governance and operations.
But that's a classic point of contention, isn't it? Whether those safeguards are enough. Critics argued, okay, maybe a supermajority stops JHC from being forced into something, but that 7-5 split still lets the Clallam side push its agenda more easily.
Precisely. That's the nuance. Critics worried that even with those safeguards, the 7-5 structure fundamentally tilted the playing field at the highest strategic level. A supermajority might be a shield, preventing JHC from being railroaded.
Right, a defensive mechanism.
Exactly. But the 7-5 structure might prevent JHC from having the offensive power to stop the alliance from adopting priorities that maybe favored OMC or policies JHC didn't like. The public perceived it as their board trading away proactive influence.
Okay, this brings us squarely to Section 2, the secrecy timeline. Executive sessions, alleged unauthorized actions. This whole intricate structure, Project Driftwood, was apparently developed and, crucially, greenlit behind closed doors. And it seems to all circle back to one specific meeting, the executive session on February 5th, 2025.
That date is absolutely ground zero for the whole controversy. The official records, the public notice, stated the reason for that closed-door session was the real estate exemption. They even cited the specific state laws, the RCWs.
And that exemption is narrow, right? It's for buying or selling property.
Extremely narrow. It exists so public bodies can negotiate property deals without tipping their hand on price or location, which could hurt their bargaining position. It's about land. It's about lease terms. It's about purchase price. It's not about completely restructuring the governance of the entire hospital district.
So if the legal justification was land and money, why were they allegedly talking about governance? Commissioner Matt Reddy's account is very specific and, frankly, pretty damning about what really happened in that room.
Reddy insisted the discussion had almost nothing to do with real estate. He maintained it focused entirely on the massive PHA governance restructuring plan. And here's the alleged core legal breach. Reddy documented that CEO Glenn specifically asked the board for approval inside that closed session to submit the entire 160-page proposal to OMC. And, according to Reddy, 4 commissioners indicated their consent. Right there, in private. That nod, that verbal agreement, even if informal. That's the heart of the alleged OPMA violation.
Let's just clarify the legal term here. That consensus from the majority to move the proposal forward, that's considered an illegal straw poll, right? Or maybe broader, an unauthorized board action taken privately. Why is that so strictly forbidden?
Because the Open Public Meetings Act is crystal clear. All final actions, and really all the collective deliberation that lead to a final decision, has to happen in public, period. The law explicitly says you cannot take final action or give collective consent in an executive session.
Even informally?
Even informally. If a majority agrees, yeah, go ahead, submit that huge proposal that changes everything. That is deliberation in action. The law views that as trying to bypass public debate, presenting the community with a done deal of fait accompli.
And the timeline certainly seems to back up the idea that the CEO felt he had approval. The proposal went out just a week later, February 12th. Yet, even when asked directly by the public in subsequent meetings, the board majority and the CEO seemed to downplay the whole thing.
Oh, absolutely minimized it. They use phrases like airy-fairy, nothing concrete, just possibilities, which is, well, it's hard to square with the fact that, according to our sources, OMC had already advanced JHC to the next round of partnership talks by February 19th.
So it wasn't airy-fairy at all. It was serious and moving forward.
Exactly. That level of public denial, while the plan was actively progressing in a competitive process, strongly suggests, a deliberate strategy of concealment. Keep it under wraps to avoid public blowback until it's too late.
And the documents even suggest a specific tactic to lock things in before the public could effectively mobilize against it.
Yes, this goes beyond just minimizing. It looks like calculated legal maneuvering. Sources indicate CEO Glenn later talked about using a, quote, binding, non-binding letter of intent, an LOI.
A binding, non-binding LOI. What does that even mean?
It's a bit of a legal gray area, but the intent is usually clear. You try to create enough contractual obligation to legally commit the organization, in this case, JHC, to the plan, making it really hard or costly to back out later. And the key timing. Do this before launching any real public information campaign in Jefferson County.
So create the legal entanglement first, then tell the public.
Essentially, yeah. Attempt to bypass informed public consent by creating contractual pressure first.
This also connects to another issue Reddy raised immediately after that February 5th meeting, the possibility of serial meetings. He pointed to emails flying back and forth between February 6th and 11th, with commissioners apparently giving feedback on drafts of the proposal. For our listeners, what's a serial meeting and why is it illegal under OPMA?
A serial meeting is basically a way boards try to get around the open meeting requirement. Instead of meeting all together publicly, they communicate in smaller groups or often one-on-one to reach a consensus. The classic is the hub and spoke model.
How does that work?
The CEO, or maybe a consultant, the hub, talks individually with Commissioner A, gets their input, then talks to Commissioner B, gets their input, then Commissioner C, the spokes. They never meet all together, but the hub gathers enough individual agreement, usually a quorum, 3 out of 5, to move forward.
So they build consensus piece by piece, in private.
Exactly. Even though no quorum physically met at one time, the effect is collective deliberation and decision-making outside of public view. Ray saw those emails with draft edits and feedback going around and immediately flagged it. If 3 or more commissioners weighed in substantially on developing that proposal via email, boom, that's arguably an illegal serial meeting. Collective deliberation has to be transparent.
Okay, let's move to Section 3, the legal fallout. These allegations of secrecy weren't just one commissioner's opinion. They started to harden into a kind of legal consensus from outside bodies saying, yeah, violations likely happened here.
The agreement on the core issue is pretty striking. It keeps coming back to the misuse of that February 5th executive session. Multiple independent parties looked at this. The Jefferson County Sheriff's Report, outside lawyers hired by the whistleblowers, names like Austin Hatcher, Allied Law Group, and even the hospital's own internal review, conducted by the law firm Ogden Murphy Wallace, or OMW.
And what did they all find?
They all basically concluded that using that very narrow real estate exemption to discuss a massive governance restructuring was, quote, highly questionable, and almost certainly violated the Open Public Meetings Act.
And what's the practical consequence if they violated OPMA like that? The law has teeth, right?
It does. The specific statute, RCW 42.3.060, says any action taken in violation of OPMA, like that alleged secret approval to submit the proposal, can be declared null and void by a court.
Void, meaning the whole thing could be wiped out.
Potentially, yes. All that work, the 160-page proposal, the negotiations, the expense, it could all be legally invalid because the very first step, the decision to submit it, was potentially taken illegally. And the sheriff's report was quite direct. OPMA violations likely occurred, and unauthorized action was taken.
That intense legal scrutiny then naturally turned a spotlight onto the hospital's own lawyer. Commissioner Reddy didn't just aim his complaints at the CEO and the board majority. He went after their legal counsel, too.
He did. He filed a formal complaint with the Washington State Bar Association against Attorney Brad Berg. The core allegation was severe, that Berg actively participated in or facilitated the concealment by advising the board that these wide-ranging governance talks could somehow fit under that narrow real estate exemption. Essentially, Reddy accused the lawyer of providing the legal cover for an illegal act.
How did the other commissioners react to that? Accusing your lawyer is a big step.
They defended Berg vigorously. Their position was, Look, he's the expert, the definitive person on this particular type of issue. They claimed they relied on his professional advice in good faith. So if the lawyer said it was okay, they felt justified, even if that advice later turned out to be questionable.
But Reddy's point was about willful participation, wasn't it? That the lawyer was in the room when they discussed governance, not real estate.
That was his counter. He argued the lawyer knew, or should have known, the discussion strayed far beyond the bounds of the stated exemption.
Okay, let's quickly revisit those alleged serial meetings, because Reddy claimed there were 2 more attempts after that initial February issue.
That's right, the pattern seemed to continue. Reddy documented 2 distinct attempts at that illegal hub-and-spoke communication. First, in April 2025, there were these private 30-minute one-on-one phone calls scheduled between individual commissioners and an outside consultant, Karma Bass.
And
Reddy refused to participate. He explicitly cited the risk of it constituting another OPMA violation. He clearly understood the law and wasn't going to be drawn into it.
And the second attempt involved the board's own legal review. That seems particularly ironic.
It does, doesn't it? The board hired the OMW law firm specifically to review OPMA compliance because Reddy was raising hell about violations. But then, in June 2025, what happens? Private, one-on-one meetings get scheduled between the OMW lawyer and individual commissioners.
And Reddy refused again.
Refused again for the same reason. His argument was solid. If the point is to discuss OPMA compliance issues affecting the whole board, the lawyer should report to the full board together, either in an open session or a properly called executive session, not conduct a series of private chats that could easily become another serial meeting, just compounding the original problem.
Okay, one last piece in this legal tangle. The non-disclosure agreement, the NDA. The board majority and the CEO kept bringing this up, citing an NDA with OMC as the reason they had to keep Project Driftwood secret. What's the legal reality there? Can a private contract trump state transparency law?
The legal reality is pretty clear-cut on this. No, an NDA, a private agreement between 2 parties, cannot override state law, especially not foundational laws like the Open Public Meetings Act or the Public Records Act.
Already challenged this.
Fiercely. He argued constantly that an NDA cannot possibly supersede the fiduciary duty a public hospital district owes to its taxpayers. An elected official's primary duty is to the public and the law, not to a confidentiality clause in a commercial agreement.
Yet, despite that apparent legal conflict, the CEO, Mike Glenn, was publicly leaning on the NDA as justification.
And that's where it gets even more contentious. Glenn later claimed publicly that the OMW legal review, that internal review, had, quote, asked and answered the question about his authority to enter into these confidential agreements.
But Reddy disputed that interpretation.
He called it a false statement. Reddy argued the OMW memo only addressed whether the CEO had the internal authority to physically sign an NDA. It did not address the core issue, whether that NDA could then be used as a shield to violate the OPMA's transparency requirements. It suggests, again, an attempt to perhaps selectively interpret legal advice to justify the secrecy after the fact.
All right, this takes us to Section 4, the suppression and the whistleblower's burden. This is where it really boiled over into public view, that confrontation on March 26, 2025. Commissioner Reddy tried to use a public meeting to tell the community what was happening with the secret proposal.
And the reaction was, frankly, shocking. As Reddy started to lay out the details of Project Driftwood, the board chair, Jill Bueller, did something extraordinary. She muted his microphone. Live, during the public meeting.
Muted him, an elected official.
Muted him, and then publicly accused him of making unsubstantiated claims, saying they were bordering on libel or slander. Then she just shut down any further discussion on the topic.
That's a direct assault on democratic process, silencing an elected representative. What was the board majority's justification for such a drastic move?
They basically admitted their motive was strategic, not procedural. Their later statement said they attempted to limit the time Commissioner Reddy was able to speak because they were genuinely worried his public disclosures would, and I quote, jeopardize the acceptance of the alliance proposal by OMC. They feared it would lead to a lost opportunity.
So they admitted they silenced him to protect the deal.
Pretty much. They even conceded that revealing the details prematurely might have contributed to OMC eventually backing away. In their calculus, securing the partnership was more important than allowing an elected official to inform his constituents about a fundamental governance change.
The legal implications seem huge. You have an official being stopped from speaking on a matter directly relevant to the hospital's entire future.
It's powerful evidence of that institutional resistance to transparency we talked about. Reddy wasn't off topic. He was talking about the core governance and financial future of the district. The board's action showed they viewed public disclosure not as a duty, but as an obstacle to their strategic goals. And they used their procedural power controlling the microphone to enforce that secrecy.
Seeing this, Reddy clearly decided this was more than just a political spat. He took it to law enforcement. He filed criminal complaints with the sheriff and the county prosecutor, alleging official misconduct under state law.
His argument was specific, based on the statute RCW 9A.A0.010. Official misconduct, he argued, involves knowingly committing an unauthorized act. For Reddy, that was submitting the huge proposal without a proper public vote, and then compounding it by making false or misleading statements to the public to cover up that initial unauthorized action.
He wasn't alleging theft or personal enrichment?
No, not direct financial corruption. His focus was on the willful disregard for their legal duties as public officials, acting outside their authority, knowingly.
Then the sheriff's report came out on May 14th, and it was complex. It seemed to give something to both sides.
It was definitely nuanced. The sheriff concluded, okay, no criminal charges would be filed. The reasoning cited was a lack of clear intent to harm anyone, including the public, at least as defined by the prosecutor for that specific charge. But, crucially, the sheriff was adamant that OPMA violations likely occurred, and that unauthorized action was taken by the board or CEO.
So Reddy seized on that discrepancy, the finding of likely illegal acts but no charges.
Exactly. He argued the prosecutor applied the wrong legal standard for official misconduct. He maintained the law only requires knowing you're acting beyond your legal authority and doing it willfully. It doesn't require proving malicious intent or specific financial harm.
So the argument becomes, the sheriff and prosecutor acknowledged the illegal actions likely happened, but set the bar for criminal intent too high, letting the board and CEO off the hook criminally.
That's the core of Reddy's rebuttal. He argued that the deception, the secrecy, the unauthorized submission, the public downplaying, even if it didn't cause immediate financial loss, amounted to what he very pointedly called minor fraud. And he described that kind of thing as a cancer in local politics. His point was knowingly bypassing the democratic process isn't just a mistake, it's a deliberate act undermining public trust.
All right, Section 5, the fallout. Censure, lawsuits. The board's reaction to Reddy, despite the sheriff confirming likely OPMA violations, wasn't exactly conciliatory. They moved to formally punish him. In October 2025, they voted 4-1 to censure him. Yeah, the censure resolution essentially painted Reddy as the problem. It accused him of breaching board conduct rules. Two main points. First, his refusal to, quote, support the legitimacy and authority of the board's actions, even the potentially illegal ones. And second, his disclosing those confidential executive session discussions. For the majority, clearly, maintaining board unity and secrecy trumped the public's right to know about potential lawbreaking.
And Reddy's response to being censured really crystallizes his entire stance in the saga.
It's a powerful defense rooted in his oath of office. He said, and I'm quoting here, "No public official is obligated to support the legitimacy of an illegal act. My oath of office to defend the Constitution supersedes any corporate policy."
Wow.
He's drawing a clear line. The law, the OPMA, that's his highest loyalty. If the board majority breaks that law, his duty is to expose it, no matter what internal policies or pressure from colleagues say. It perfectly captures that tension between institutional loyalty and his sworn public duty.
And the seriousness of these governance issues was quickly validated from the outside, wasn't it? Just days after the censure, a major lawsuit landed.
Less than 2 weeks later, October 23, 2025. Arthur West, who's a very well-known and often successful open government advocate in Washington state, known for holding public bodies accountable, filed a civil lawsuit right there in Superior Court under the OPMA against JHC as an entity, against the board members individually, and against the CEO.
So not just the institution, but the individuals.
Yes, naming them personally. This lawsuit basically confirmed the external view that these weren't minor procedural hiccups. These were seen as serious, ongoing governance failures demanding legal intervention.
What exactly does Arthur West's lawsuit demand? What's he asking the court to do?
He's asking the court first to formally declare that OPMA violations did occur, and second, critically, he wants the court to impose statutory civil penalties against the individual defendants.
Penalties for the board members themselves.
Yes. In Washington, the OPMA penalties are designed to have teeth. It's $500 for a first violation, then $1,000 for each subsequent violation. Given the multiple alleged violations here, that fifth straw poll, the potential serial meetings, acting on that potentially void approval, The financial exposure for each board member could be significant.
Ouch.
Plus, the suit seeks an injunction, a court order, telling the defendants to stop violating the OPMA in the future.
So this lawsuit essentially validates Reddy's claims from an external legal perspective. It shifts it from an internal fight to documented legal liability.
Absolutely. And if you zoom out a bit, this whole PHA mess didn't just appear out of nowhere. Reddy's own documented history with the district, including apparently a decade-long fight just to get the basic right to record public board meetings.
A decade to record meetings.
According to the sources, yes.
Yeah.
It suggests a much deeper, maybe persistent institutional culture of, well, hostility to transparency, as Reddy put it. The PHA fiasco seems like the culmination of that long, simmering culture colliding with a really high-stakes strategic decision.
And the fight for basic information isn't over. Even now, Reddy is still pushing for the release of the full 160-page Project Driftwood proposal and that internal OMW legal memo the board used to justify its actions.
Right. He argues these are clearly public records, and the community has a right to see them. The board has publicly said they relied on legal advice, but refusing to release the actual memo just fuels more public suspicion, doesn't it?
It certainly does. People want to see the reasoning behind controversial decisions, especially when that reasoning led to acknowledged OPMA violations. Keeping the memo hidden makes it look like they're relying on its conclusion while maybe hiding a flawed analysis within it.
It leaves that impression, yes.
Okay, so let's try to sum up where we are. We had a major governance proposal structuring a new superboard with unequal power, naming the current CEO as its head, allegedly pushed through in secret, submitted without a required public vote, and then seemingly covered up by public officials who appeared to prioritize closing a deal over following state transparency laws. And the legal and political fallout is still unfolding.
That captures the core conflict perfectly. The PHA fiasco really hammers home that this clash between strategic hospital administration and mandatory public transparency isn't just theoretical. It leads to real legal liability, potential civil penalties for individuals. When public entities put organizational convenience or perceived strategic necessity ahead of state law, they risk not just lawsuits, but fundamentally eroding democratic control over essential public services like healthcare.
It raises that huge question.
It really does. How can hospitals pursue these complex, fast-moving, commercially sensitive regional partnerships, which might actually be necessary for survival, without breaking the strict rules of public transparency? That tension isn't going away. It's likely to get worse as healthcare continues to consolidate.
Definitely. That tension between public duty and the pressure for secrecy is just so clear here. The CEO and board claim that NDA, that non-disclosure agreement, tied their hands, forced them into secrecy over the PHA. But as we've discussed, the law seems pretty clear. The fiduciary duty of elected officials, their duty to you, the public, comes before any private contract.
State law dictates public access, not a commercial agreement designed to limit it. That legal principle is maybe the most crucial takeaway for anyone listening, especially if they serve on a public board. Your oath is paramount.
So the final thought we want to leave you with is this. Consider the situation Commissioner Reddy found himself in. He believes he's witnessing illegal secrecy, unauthorized actions. He speaks out. And his reward. He's censured by his colleagues. His microphone is muted in a public meeting. He faces potential legal threats himself. How should the law specifically protect a public servant in that position? Someone who believes their oath requires them to expose illegality, even if it means breaking ranks and violating the confidentiality norms their own board is trying to enforce. Think about the personal cost for the whistleblower versus the societal cost of allowing that secrecy to stand.